In 1617, an old man climbed to the top of the tallest tower in Venice, strapped on a device made of wood and stretched cloth, and jumped. At least that's the story. Whether it's actually true is a mystery historians still argue about today. But the invention itself was real, and it still saves lives. 400 years later, this is the story of Faust Vrančić, the man who may have built and may have tested the world's first parachute. Faust Vrančić was born in 1551 in Šibenik, a walled city on the Dalmatian coast. His family had roots stretching back to Bosnia, and his uncle, Anton Vrančić, was a respected diplomat who corresponded with some of the leading thinkers of the era. Around 1595, Vrančić published a book in Venice titled Machinae Novae, New Machines. It was a collection of engraved illustrations depicting dozens of inventions and mechanical concepts, some practical, some wildly ahead of their time. The book included windmills, water mills, suspension bridges, and devices for raising water. Genuinely useful engineering concepts that reflected decades of careful observation. But one illustration would eventually eclipse everything else in the book. Vrančić had studied an old, unpublished sketch by Leonardo da Vinci. A pyramid-shaped parachute concept da Vinci had drawn a century earlier, but never built or tested. Vrančić took the idea further. Leonardo's pyramid was brilliant on paper, but heavy and impractical. Vrančić's version relied on fabric catching the air, rather than a rigid wooden structure, making it far closer to the parachutes we know today. He kept a simple square frame, but replaced da Vinci's rigid shape with a loose, sail-like piece of cloth that billowed outward. A design that, as it turns out, slows a falling body far more effectively. He called his design Homo Volans, the flying man. According to a story that circulated for centuries, Vrančić didn't just draw his flying man, he became one. Imagine standing on the edge of one of Europe's tallest towers. Below you, stone streets. Above you, nothing but cloth, rope, and faith. The legend claims that in 1617, at around 65 years old and reportedly in poor health, Vrančić climbed to the top of St. Mark's Campanile in Venice, strapped on his own parachute and jumped, successfully proving his design worked in front of witnesses. The tower was nearly 100 meters tall, roughly the height of a modern 30-story building. If true, it would make him the first person in recorded history to build and successfully test a real parachute. Here's the complication. The earliest written account of this jump doesn't appear until roughly 30 years later in a 1648 book by John Wilkins, a founding member of England's Royal Society. No contemporary record from 1617 itself has ever been found. No eyewitness account survives from the actual year it supposedly happened. Modern historians are split. Some think it's a romantic legend that grew in the retelling. Others point out that a detailed, specific story, a named tower, a named inventor, a design that actually matches his own illustration, is an oddly precise thing to simply invent from nothing. We may never know for certain whether Vrančić himself ever leapt from that tower. What we do know is that his design was real, published and studied, and that someone eventually would prove it worked for certain. Machinae Novae wasn't written only in Latin. Vrančić had it translated into Italian, Spanish, French, and German, ensuring his ideas could travel across Europe's intellectual centers. This was unusual for the time. Most technical works stayed locked in Latin, accessible only to a narrow circle of scholars. Vrančić wanted his ideas read. That same year, he published something else remarkable, one of the very first dictionaries to include the Croatian language in print, alongside Latin, Italian, German, and Hungarian. A small but significant act of putting his native language on the same page as Europe's dominant scholarly languages. Between the dictionary and the parachute sketch, Vrančić had, almost accidentally, made two lasting contributions, one linguistic, one mechanical, that would each outlive him by centuries. Vrančić died in January 1617 and was buried on the small island of Prvić, near his hometown of Šibenik. Whether or not he ever tested his own invention, Machinae Novae kept circulating across Europe for generations after his death. For over 150 years, the Homo volans illustration remained mostly a curiosity, a clever sketch in an old book of inventions, admired but untested by anyone with solid documented proof. Then, in 1783, a French physicist named Louis-Sébastien Lenormand conducted a documented witnessed parachute jump from a tower in Montpellier, France. This time, with clear contemporary records confirming it actually happened. Lenormand's jump is what historians consider the first parachute descent that can be verified beyond doubt. 2 years later, he coined a new word for the device, combining the Italian para, meaning against, with the French chute, meaning fall, parachute, against the fall. The core design principle, a canopy of fabric slowing a falling body, traced directly back to the concept Vrančić had illustrated nearly 2 centuries earlier. Over the following centuries, parachute design evolved rapidly. Better materials, better shapes, better control. But the basic principle Vrančić had sketched, surface area creating drag, slowing a fall to a survivable speed, never changed. By the First World War, parachutes had become standard safety equipment for pilots and air crews, saving thousands of lives in a war that made flying and falling a daily reality. Today, the parachute is everywhere. Military operations, emergency evacuations, space capsule landings, and an entire recreational sport built around the controlled thrill of falling. Every single one of them relies on the same basic physics a Renaissance bishop from a small Dalmatian coastal town sketched out in a book of new machines, half convinced it might someday actually fly. Today, Faust Vrančić is remembered across Croatia and in aviation history circles worldwide as a foundational figure in the parachute's invention, regardless of whether he personally ever leapt from that tower in Venice. International aviation bodies have formally credited his design as a genuine precursor to the modern parachute, engraving his name permanently into the history of human flight. Or at least, controlled falling. His book remains preserved and studied today, a strange kind of monument. Proof that an idea can outlive every uncertainty about how, or whether, it was first put to the test. Maybe he jumped, maybe he didn't. But 400 years later, people jump anyway, and land safely because of him. We'll probably never know for certain if a sick 65-year-old bishop really leapt off the tallest tower in Venice to prove a point. But maybe that's not really the point. Sometimes the idea matters more than the proof. And sometimes someone else comes along centuries later and proves it for you. Vindicandum. Subscribe for more forgotten history.